today we're joined by Andrew Bray, who was appointed as CEO of Strickland Metals in April 2021. Andrew has 10 years experience as a mining executive, has led expansions and financing of multiple natural resource companies. He has extensive knowledge in coordinating strategic growth with prior experience with Gateway Mining, Silver Mines and Futura Resources. Andrew, welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Jason. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming. I know there are a lot of existing shareholders on here, so thanks for giving up your time this morning, and also some people that are potentially new holders, so welcome to you as well. For those that have been following the story, we've done quite a lot in a short period of time. It's been, over the last 3 months, it's been a complete reset for the company. We brought in a new board and management team, and importantly on this part, we'll talk about it in a second, but here the board and the management have all worked together across a lot of other projects in the past, and I think it's important when you want to move with the pace that we want to do, that there's enough familiarity and trust there. We also have brought in some new capital to the company by way of a rights issue, which we completed a couple of months ago, and also a recent 8 million placement, plus a rights issue, which is currently open to raise a further 4. We've refocused the company on the Yandal belt. Our view on Strickland was that, or I should say on the northeast flank of the Yandal belt, was that it presented an incredible opportunity for consolidation. There were a number of companies there with fragmented ownership, scattered resources, and our view was that by simply consolidating that, it was a great value creation proposition, but also taking a systematic approach to it could potentially yield a really exciting discovery or two within that part of the belt. So we've refocused on the Yandal belt, and finally we've undertaken quite a lot of significant M&A activity. So from when we got involved, the attributable resource to the company was around about 150,000 ounces, and within 2.5 short months, we've taken it to over 600, which I think by any measure is pretty incredible to have done that in a short period of time, particularly in the middle of the West Australian goldfields. So just a brief overview of the last few months. At the start of April, the new board came in, and we shortly thereafter announced the 5 million rights issue. At the same time, Peter Langworthy joined the board leading the technical team. Langers is probably well known to a lot of people here on the call. At the beginning of May, we bought out Silver Lake's joint venture interest in Horsewell. I should say that we had a plan at the start of this, and it was to buy out Silver Lake, it was to acquire the Renegade ground, and then it was to acquire Millrose. And fortunately, we were able to execute that plan really well. Subsequent to the Silver Lake purchase, Mark Cossum joined the board, and that was a really critical appointment for us because Mark actually managed the Horsewell project in a previous role with Bray, and there's a huge amount of project knowledge and history there that Mark's being able to bring to the table. We closed the rights issue at sort of mid-May. Beginning of June, we announced a transaction with Renegade to acquire their Yandal project. Towards the end of June, we announced the Millrose acquisition and also the fundraising. And throughout that period, we've also been planning and gearing up to start undertaking some significant exploration. So it's been a really busy and I think indeed successful time for Strickland over the last few months. As I alluded to earlier, we've been busy on the M&A trail. You can see a pretty significant resource growth over that 3-month period. As I alluded to, we started with about 150,000 ounces, and thanks to this activity, we've taken it to over 600. So we're at 600,000 ounces before we've even started drilling, and I think we're pretty confident that this 600,000 ounces is really just from tinkering around the edge of the system. We haven't, we're not in the main parts of it yet, or we're pretty confident that significant mineralisation could be. And in addition to that M&A activity, it's also given us over 100 kilometres of strike over the Celia Shear, which is a really significant geological structure. So we've created a great resource base, a great platform for future growth off that, with also a tremendous exploration upside, thanks to the land acquisition. Just an overview of the capital structure. Once these transactions, the placement and rights issue are tidied up, we'll be sitting with just over $1 billion on issue. At a bit over 4 cents, we're looking at a market cap of sort of 42, 43 mil, with the cash balance of about 7, an enterprise value of approximately 35 mil. There's a good commitment from board and management holding 12%. The board are all taking up their rights in the rights issue and bidding for shortfall. And it's reasonably tight register with the top 40 holding half the shares on issue. So just a quick run through of the people. Anthony McClure, Tony and I have worked together on a lot of projects over the last sort of 6 or 7 years. The biggest one being Silver Mines. So Tony's currently the Managing Director of Silver Mines, which has been a big success for us. That was a 25 mil asset acquisition, and it's now around a 350 mil market cap or thereabouts. Mark Cossum, as I mentioned, Mark was a key appointment for us, given his previous involvement with Horsewell. He's current Managing Director of Gateway. Gateway at the time was the largest shareholder in Strickland, and that's really the link of how this whole Strickland deal came together. But again, Mark, a tremendous geologist and a huge acquisition of that project history for us. David Morgan, pretty well known around Perth. He's on the board of Discovex. Trent looks after all the corporate side of things for a number of listed companies, including Gateway. But Trent and I work quite closely together on a lot of things. Paul Skinner. Paul is the representative from the previous board and brings a lot of that corporate history with him as well. In terms of management, myself, and I've been doing this sort of work for over 10 years now. I had a few pretty good wins along the way, including the Gateway and Silver Mines. Futura Resources, it's an unlisted company which people might not have heard of, but that was a 10 mil asset purchase, a coal asset, which will be in production in Q4 this year with an NPV of about 400 mil. Peter Langworthy, I think Langer's reputation speaks for itself. One of Australia's leading geologists, and I think he probably his early claim to fame was finding all the Jubilee nickel deposits, but had a lot of other success subsequent to that. And finally, Sleeman, who's the company secretary. Sleeman has worked across a lot of listed companies, particularly in our stable over the last few years. So the Yandal consolidation, like I said, we had a strategy here, which was to try and put together the entirety of that northeast flank of the Yandal belt. Prior to our involvement, you had us, obviously, Silver Lake, Renegade, and Millrose on that part of the belt, and also Northern Star. And fortunately, we were able to execute that strategy really well and take out those other interests on the belt to the point where it's really only us and Northern Star now that are the key players left on that part of the belt. And like I said, it's put together a really good resource base for us, which is an exceptional platform for future resource growth, but also a large land holding, which we think is hugely prospective and has been indeed hugely underexplored by previous explorers. And like I touched on that, the resource base, we put together 11.7 million tonnes at 1.6 grams for 603,000 ounces. So I'll touch on briefly the Millrose acquisition being the most recent one. You can see the resource table there, conducted by CSA Global. The Millrose for us was really the last piece of the puzzle, and we worked really hard to get a good deal done for shareholders and indeed for the Millrose side as well. This package of land has had really next to no exploration conducted on it for over 15 years, and some of the work we're doing now is pulling up some really interesting targets for us, which will which we'll get into when the drilling gets underway. But again, it was the last piece of the puzzle, and I think it's been a really well-received acquisition. Indeed, Mines Online put out an analysis of it independent of the company, which showed that in their view, we acquired it for quite a significant discount to its market valuation. Key acquisition terms on that, there's a 10 mil aggregate purchase, 1 mil upfront, which has been paid, 5 mil in cash in 3 months, and then a further 4, which can be paid either 2 cash or 2 in stock, or 4 cash. And that's being financed by the placement, which has already been completed, just subject to shareholder approval, and also fully underwritten 4 mil rights issue. So like I said earlier, our plan was to undertake a thorough, systematic approach of this part of the belt, which just hasn't happened in the past. Rig availability has obviously been an issue for all explorers in WA, but we've managed to secure an air core rig, which when it arrives in a couple of months, it won't leave until Christmas next year. And it'll complete around about 100,000 metres of air core drilling in that time. With the idea being that as assays are received, it can go back to any other areas of interest and tighten up the drilling on a tighter grid. And we've got an RC rig coming, which will arrive next March, and it will continue until Christmas next year as well. But in the interim, there are some other programs. There's 5,000 metres of RC and diamond, which will be focused on dusk till dawn, and a couple of other smaller targets as well. And we've secured an air core rig to do a short program in the short term as well. Some of these things will change, but we'll put out an update soon to the market around where we're at with these programs. It's all very much dependent on rig availability, but luckily we think we've been able to secure a couple of rigs to do some more work in the immediate short term. But the key part from here is it's a systematic approach. If there is something there, and I think you'd have to be a pretty brave betting man to say that there isn't anything there, given the endowment in the rest of the belt. But this approach is the way that, in our view, will give us the best chance of finding or making a significant discovery along the belt. And like I said, it's the first time ever that this part of the belt, the tier 1 belt, has been subject to this sort of systematic exploration. A little bit on Horsewell. So Horsewell was the original flagship project. The key part here is that a lot of the ground that we think is the more prospective ground, and in the main part of the system, has never been drilled with an RC rig. There's the Big Daddy prospect, which some of the older shareholders might remember. It's wide-spaced air core. It's over the Celia Shear. There are big gold trends through it, and they just haven't been drilled. So there are some clear zones that we would look to start working on first up. This is the resources for Horsewell, 257,000 ounces at 1.4 grams a tonne. Previously, the company has looked at, under previous management, of some sort of short-term production, but our approach is to build a much larger global resource before looking at any sort of production. This is the gold trends I was alluding to at Big Daddy. So it's 800 metres by 160 metre wide-spaced air core. The air core rig is going to start at the top of this trend when that major systematic program gets underway and drills south. But this, I mean, as an exploration play in Western Australia on a greenstone belt, to have this sort of anomalism with granite intrusives over a shear zone, I think it's pretty remarkable to think that it's sitting there and has not been drilled with an RC rig. And indeed, these programs were some of the things that Mark Cossum, who's on the board, that Mark wanted to drill when he was on the joint venture, on the Dore side of the joint venture back in a previous role. But for various reasons, those drill programs just never occurred. So indeed, it was Mark that pointed us to this area when we started looking at Horsewell as the most obvious targets to begin on. Dusk till dawn. So I think the main takeaway from this slide is is that within this system, it has both grade and width. 13 metres at 8 grams, 6 metres at 16, they're pretty remarkable results by any measure. So dusk till dawn, it's a great target for us, but I think the key takeaway that I think people should take is that within this gold system, it's got shallow, high-grade gold, and it's got width. And for us, it's simply a matter of doing the work on the ground to try and locate areas where we can find repeats of this sort of mineralisation elsewhere in the system. And one final kicker. So a lot of people, I think, will be familiar with Rumble Resources. Rumble has 45 k's of strike of their Irahidi project immediately to the north of Horsewell. Their market cap's gone from sort of 50, 60 mil to around about 350 at the moment, 330, 350 at the moment, off the back of a really exciting zinc lead discovery. So their 45 kilometres of strike extends southwest, and the bottom 30 kilometres of that strike actually extends into the Horsewell, one of the Horsewell tenements. And indeed, in some of the work we've been doing recently, trying to understand that structure and the system and the mineralisation, we've come across some pretty interesting zinc lead anomalism, including one result there at 17 metres at 2.5% zinc lead. It's not quite in the Rumble league, but it's certainly not at all far off. And it's pretty good for a first pass drill into that target. So quickly, in summary, we are undertaking a review of the other projects, but the key focus for us is unlocking that part of the Yandal belt through major or systematic exploration programs. And I think the only other point I'd like to add is that the board and management have been very supportive in terms of cash contribution to the company by way of placements or on market purchases. Indeed, I've been doing this for probably over 10 years now. And I've always found the biggest wins come from building big positions and building them early. And that's what we're doing here. And when you find the right opportunity, you pin your ears back and build that position. So, I mean, I've already spent a few $100,000 on market buying stock. I've put $1 million into the placement at 4 cents and taking up my rights of about 230,000. So that's excluding any future purchases. That's over $1.5 million of hard cash from me into the company. And the way I look at it is that, like I said, we're sort of 35 mil EV post all of this. And for that enterprise value, you get 600,000 ounces of gold, a huge exploration upside from a gold perspective and surrounded by Northern Star. Plus you get 30 kilometres of strike of the Rumble extension. So for that price, I think it's, to me, that seems like a very, very compelling valuation proposition. Hence why, I'm in there supporting it with money, as are the rest of the board and management. So Jason, any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for the presentation. Yeah, we have had a few questions submitted by our guests. I guess the first one is, what type of discoveries is Strickland targeting along the northeast Yandal flank?
Yeah, we're looking. We're not looking to replicate the Horse prospects, which was sort of, I guess, smaller gold pods. Nor will we initially be looking at depth. We're really targeting that largely untouched ground, looking for shallow, significant, thick mineralisation. So much the same as I guess the extension on the Celia Shear, moving north from the Horse prospects to areas where that mineralisation can really open up into larger ounces, but similar grade.
Yeah, great. So another question we had was, will the second phase of RC drilling be primarily focused on dusk till dawn deposit or follow-up targets from the 100,000 metres AAC campaign?
No, it'll be very much focused on following up the air core campaign. The initial program will target dusk till dawn in the next few months, but once the main RC program kicks off early next year, it'll follow the air core program. I should caveat that by saying though that everything is subject to results, and if Dusk Till Dawn does open up at depth, which is every possibility, then that could change our plans. But as it stands, it'll be following the air core rig.
Okay. How far does the depletion zone that is common across the Yandal reach up into Strickland's northeast flank?
It's a hard question to answer because it's variable. At Dusk Till Dawn, we see some depletion above the mineralisation, but at the Horse prospects, for example, there's enrichment above the mineralisation. Immediately to the north of the Horse prospects, it's depleted. So, I mean, the answer to that question is that it varies across the project and really depends on the prospect.
And so will the company be focused on any near-term base metals exploration along the strike from Rumble resources? On top of that, what is the plan for the other projects that the company has? Is there any spend allocated to?
We are going to do some work short term on the Rumble ground, but it's going to be it'll be preliminary work like soil sampling and some geophysics, getting ready for some more significant drilling. But to reiterate, the focus is very much on the gold prospects at Horsewell, but we will do some work there. In terms of the other projects, we are working through what we're going to do at the moment, and I think in the next couple of months, I think we've come up with a strategy that I think will yield a lot of value for shareholders and be well supported by shareholders, but we're just working through that at the moment. But I think in the next couple of months, we'll be in a position to update the market on what we've come up with.
Okay. Yeah, great. And just lastly, in terms of the rights for the people that are shareholders, so anyone take up their rights, they've got to pay by the 26th July, yep. Is my understanding.
Correct.
Okay. Great, and I hope everyone's received their documents in the mail. So thank you, Andrew, again for your time today.